Hello and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, and the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture, Michael Hamblett and Michael Sidgwick, here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views. We have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But gents, tonight sees the first SmackDown Live of the Eric Bischoff era. And before we get into predicting what we think may well happen tonight, Michael Sidgwick,
aye,
as part of this, you were tasked with sitting down and watching an old episode of WCW Thunder to give us a sneak peek on what we can expect. So, what can we expect tonight on SmackDown?
Well, it's not looking good. It's not looking good. In fact, it's looking so bad it's good for about 25 minutes, and then you realise, oh God, this is just awful. Any kind of perverse entertainment has just gone from this. I love WWE now because it's even so good in comparison. A brief highlight reel, and I'll try and apply these points to what we can expect from the Eric Bischoff era, okay? So I watched the May 3rd, 2000 edition of WCW Thunder, which Eric Bischoff, just for a bit of context, wrote in tandem with Vince Russo. It wasn't great. Throughout the night, there was a series, far too many, of just really wildly bizarre stipulation matches. Not 2 out of 3 falls, but New York rules in which the two wrestlers wrestled in a match without rules, and they had to count their own falls because the referees in this universe they had no use for them, which is a bit like Baron Corbin. You're going to see like a bit of a bit that I'm doing here. There's one match off the top of my head, because I did try and suppress this memory actively. I think it was between Billy Kidman and Ric Flair, fought under New York rules, which meant there were no rules. Kevin Nash interfered, then Hulk Hogan interfered, and then Mike Awesome interfered. Kevin Nash bantered off Mike Awesome.
Big fan.
Right.
I knew you would be.
Grabbed the microphone, declared the winner of Billy Kidman versus Ric Flair as Mike Awesome via disqualification in a match with no rules.
What you're saying is we should have more Kevin Nash.
No, what I'm saying is Mike Awesome was declared the winner of Billy Kidman versus Ric Flair via disqualification in a match with no rules. Can you think of anything stupider than that's happened in pro wrestling recently, i.e. Gary the Goat Garbett?
Well, I don't know. I mean, are we talking about a product book by Vince Russo? It feels...
But Bischoff wrote this as well in tandem with him.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at as well is Bischoff isn't just completely overseeing this by himself. He is writing this with Vince McMahon as the editor, with a team underneath him, so it's not his pure, just like undiluted vision of what professional wrestling should be. One more thing that is a grim and ominous comparison is that throughout the show, Vince Russo, armed with a baseball bat, was just knocking over potted plants and like really subjugating the young emerging talent in the new blood, just as total dorks who couldn't get the job done. It sounds a bit like Shane McMahon, this, doesn't it? An unathletic, aspirational hardman geek, aging, not a wrestler, who was also the hardest man on the show and the center of the universe. WCW Thunder is basically WWE in 2019, so long story short, what you can expect from Eric Bischoff tonight is more of the same.
So for night 1 of the Eric Bischoff era, they've booked a SmackDown town hall meeting.
Yes.
So if that town hall has a potted plant, we know how it's going to end up. Yeah, if Shane can hold it long enough with his sweaty palms, But like,
when did the famous Dixie Carter roster address happen in TNA? Was that in the
so it was very
Bischoff Hogan reign?
Yeah. Well, no, it was like late 2009 because of the sort of pushback towards the idea of Bischoff and Hogan coming in. So before they were through the door, there was enough protest and worry and concern from people within TNA that they weren't sort of, Dixie didn't feel like she had people on her side supporting her vision. So Bischoff's impact was felt before his first day at work, and then
So that's another eerie parallel.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he's not through the door yet, is he? Tonight's the night.
Tonight is the night, yeah. To be fair, the parallels through Impact more worryingly present, I think, because they're relatively recent. We're going back this decade. We're into 2010 and 2011, where Eric Bischoff had sold himself on being able to sort of help Impact, save Impact, and he didn't have the excuse of a Vince Russo or present day of Vince McMahon on his side. That was all him.
It's intriguing when you think about it, because when this big announcement was made that Heyman obviously was going to take over Monday Night Raw, Bischoff was going to take over SmackDown, people all said, oh, this is fantastic news. We're getting change in WWE. The change that we've been calling out for since apparently we became the authority is finally arriving. We had, obviously, Paul Heyman. We've slowly seen him with this elements of what we assume is Paul Heyman's influence on Monday Night Raw. We haven't really seen as much of that on SmackDown, and I think a lot of people said, oh, well, this is great news. You think about the Monday Night Wars and, how influential Eric Bischoff was when WCW was doing well. But there's another side of that, which obviously he was there, well, for parts of it wasn't going well until issues happened. And then also, for fans who are aware, Eric Bischoff hasn't been keeping up to speed with all the latest wrestling developments, has he? Like, he can comment on...
He's been doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
He's been doing a deep dive into WCW's reign of dominance on his 83 Weeks podcast. Before Michael Hamflett gives his take on this, I'll say two more things. According to last week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, Eric Bischoff hasn't made his presence felt at SmackDown to test the waters of what's going on. Hasn't really interacted with any of the talent or done any research. Like, today is his first day on the job. He's just flown in.
No pressure.
Does that not represent a complete lack of preparation?
He's going to do one of them talking head interviews to YouTube later on. Before I got this job, I'd never even watched wrestling. That's...
Another thing that's odd is that he's been installed as executive director connoting that he's going to have an influence creatively over the product. He's brought ideas to WCW, but he was never the booker.
No. The podcast is actually revealed, and I can't really attack him for this, but he's talked about how he would bring wrestlers in and he would have obviously final say over everything, but often Conrad will drill him on a finish and he'll say, well, yeah, I've said to this before, WCW weren't always hottest with a finish. I should have got somebody better on that finish. So you can almost picture him as kind of a head honcho or somebody overseeing everything and then delegating very, very well, when the product's good, delegating very, very well to the right people to go and do the right jobs. And then sure enough, when things start going wrong, it's because he's delegating to the wrong people, or he's allowing those people to be overawed by wrestlers like Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash. Very much a top level administrator, and I do think that's what he's going to bring to the role. And maybe if this is something to do with Vince McMahon taking this mythical back seat and he becomes more of a figure of authority backstage, that's probably no bad thing, because somebody with different ideas and different visions. But creatively, it's hard for me to see what differences what we're going to see so visually within sort of a few weeks on television, because a lot of people conflate Eric Bischoff, the character of the mid-2000s, with a creative force. He was strictly a general manager playing a part. He was no different to Jonathan Coachman, your heel authority figure. He was just better.
Imagine Coachman booking it.
And exactly, he was just a far better performer in that role. And I think there'll be a lot of wrestlers that grew up watching him and be like, oh, I can't wait to see what 3-minute warning type thing he's going to give to me. Well, nothing, because it wasn't his work.
Do you think there's going to be some sort of hard reset tonight on SmackDown, or do you think it's going to be a case of a smattering of Bischoff to start off with?
I've got absolutely no idea, because at least with Heyman, you could see his influence on, what was it, 2 weeks ago now that the Braun Strowman, Bobby Lashley angle happened. Corey Graves was doing a bit of swearing. There was a Cook storyline. There was a general atmosphere of edge that is synonymous with what Paul Heyman brought to ECW and then subsequently the rest of the pro wrestling arena. What is an Eric Bischoff hallmark? What's a trademark of his that if it happened tonight, you'd know it is distinctly Bischoff? Because for me, Bischoff's genius, and he did have it at one point or another, was that he knew exactly what to plagiarize. He knew that he himself wasn't a great ideas man, but he looked far afield. He looked across to the east and saw what was happening with the UWFI invasion of New Japan Pro Wrestling, which informed the NWO storyline. He saw ECW and saw the emerging cruiserweight talent and thought, I'm going to have some of that to diversify the product and make it as far-reaching as possible to the most diverse audience. He looked at the Mexico scene through the relationship WCW had with AAA at the time, and saw, right, okay, I can get loads of luchadors because clearly they're very exciting and can fulfill a certain role. Every one of his trademarks is a trademark of somebody else's. So realistically, Triple H is already doing this in NXT. He's looked at something like PWG, saw the unbridled creativity, and saw I can usher that in and ramp it up with production values like befitting WWE. NXT virtually is WWE peering its head outside and going, you know what, we can budget and arguably perfect what's going on. So Triple H, in my opinion, is closer to Bischoff than he ever was to Vince. So there's nothing much out there that Bischoff can take on, if that makes any sense.
I think if he's got any creative trademark, I would say it would be the big angle, for better and worse. So the NWO was the huge angle. He didn't look at that as a wrestling storyline. He looked at that as a company takeover storyline that would feature the wrestlers in the company. He tried it again when he joined it with Vince Russo in April 2000, shortly before that Thunder, when they took the belts off. All the wrestlers said New Blood Millionaires Club, thick back line in the sand, that was abandoned within weeks, but that was the idea anyway. Did that again with TNA. January the 4th episode of Impact went head-to-head with Raw ahead of a new Monday Night Wars, which was basically some sort of mission statement that we're going to change wrestling. We're not going to tinker with 7 or 8 characters and their storylines, and we're not going to push that one guy or this one guy. We're going to completely start again, hard reset.
Hot shot everything, didn't they?
Yeah, and I don't think, not only is WWE not really set up for a hard reset anymore, they do their own version of that all the time now. You joked before about when we were the Authority that week in December.
Wild card.
The wild card rule, the superstar shake-ups. They've found their own ways to do these hard resets as and when Vince McMahon gets out of bed one morning and thinks, I fancy changing things up. That can't be Bischoff's calling card on night one. Shane McMahon having a meeting with the talent is bizarrely a very Bischoff thing, because he's always been, again, when he used to work, he was always really into the admin of pro wrestling. Before there was a Mr. McMahon and authority figures, Bischoff liked flexing that he was the EVP and he liked having commissions, things like that. And there was a time when that was relevant and interesting, but that's long gone. So I'm not so sure what exactly will, a smattering of Bischoff, I don't think that exists. I think he goes for big sweeping changes, and then if it doesn't work, he gets out of there. So then I think that's probably when we'll see him being used by the company more from a corporate standpoint than a creative one.
Now, this is, of course, an ideal time, arguably, to take over. You are a few weeks away from the second biggest pay-per-view of the year, and everything's kind of been left quite open for you in terms of the SmackDown side of things. You've got new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. You've got a WWE Champion in Kofi Kingston, who doesn't really have an opponent established as of yet. You could probably do a rematch against Joe. I don't think that's going to happen. Daniel Bryan's making this huge announcement, which we assume will be, hopefully, him looking back towards singles competition and that WWE Championship that he lost to Kofi at WrestleMania. But, again, this is all speculation, but who do you think the guys who are that Bischoff is going to prioritise and push, and maybe who are the ones that are going to be a bit more overlooked? Because obviously we've already heard and seen that Paul Heyman is a huge fan of Braun Strowman and allegedly is going to give him this monster push going forward.
Eric Bischoff in WCW was always loyal to a fault. In 1999 and 2000, it was always Vince Russo really pushing to do something with Jeff Jarrett, pushing to do something with Booker T. Eric Bischoff recognised and trusted the star value of the established names. So he did the exact same thing in TNA to a risible, laughable, like really damaging, disastrous extent with like Hulk Hogan and the Nasty Boys and Ric Flair and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I would not be surprised whatsoever if he played it safe but tinkered with it. Like subvert the formula like you did with the NWO. I'm not saying that's ever going to get reset, even though he kind of did that all the time as well. So no, that's it. That's it. He's going to reform the NWO. No, he did it several times in WCW when he ran out of ideas. They put capital T, capital B, the band back together in TNA. Eric Bischoff's career is defined by a series of diminishing returns. So maybe we could see less cynically a faction of sorts dominate over SmackDown, because that was always one of his trademarks as well.
I could see that. He tends as well, I think, to work best. So if we're assuming that this is an Eric Bischoff, as you say, that hasn't been watching the product and doesn't know, he's going to look for stars. and Vince McMahon likes that anyway. So I would fancy someone like Charlotte Flair to have a great time in the early days of Eric Bischoff, because he knows Flair, he knows her. Vince McMahon is going to say, well, she was just in the main event of WrestleMania. Immediately quite a visible character with a legacy that he understands and he can work with. So I would expect Charlotte to be getting the push for Bayley at SummerSlam, because there's a match.
And that's the right match to make.
And it is the right match, yeah, but and it's going to look good for him to be sort of saying, well, I want to give her the nod. I think it's mad that she's been sat there for 6-7 weeks doing absolutely nothing, and it's a tap in, really, isn't it? But who are the other stars? If you think of the big names, I don't even think he would maybe consider Daniel Bryan one until he's told as such that this is the guy that was going to WrestleMania.
Not his profile, is it?
Yeah, so it doesn't fit the guy that you imagine Bischoff to push. So I'm thinking off the top of my head, if he's available, someone like Roman Reigns, I would think he would want to channel him against Kofi Kingston, because it just feels big time and reliable. And I don't think he's going to want so soon into this shocking appointment, really, not exactly out of nowhere, because an Eric Bischoff is going to be around on the fringe of the wrestling industry until he dies. But certainly in terms of bringing him in at the very highest level as he has been, I think he's going to go for people that he believes he can trust right out of the gate. I think it'll be very interesting, like him being backstage and on camera even at that Raw reunion next week. I think he's going to be going around and speaking to the guys he knows from that crew and saying, who do you like? Steve Austin, who do you like? Who's your guy at the moment you're watching? Who are you into? And he's going to be taking advice. For the people he's going to push who he doesn't know, he's going to be going to his old mate stars and get, Hogan, who's the one guy? Look around, use your instinct, tell me who's the guy. Oh, Big E. Yeah, all right, I'll push Big E. I think he'll use his mates to play it safe.
You think Randy Orton's going to get a push under this?
Orton, a perfect example.
Yes,
he remembers him from
example.
his last 10 years. A perfect example. In fact, I would say Orton Kofi. Already now I can picture it being a Bischoff thing.
I hope it's Brian Kofi, but Orton Kofi would be good, and they could make a decent storyline out of it.
You won't remember or have seen it.
No, but
he'll look at a sports entertainer from the ground up in Randy Orton and think, yeah, safe pair of hands to push.
Well, he did say just before we end that were we going to end?
I was going to ask you for your hopes and fears for the Eric Bischoff era.
Right. I don't know. For God's, it's just completely uncharted territory and inexplicable territory. Speaking to Inside the Ropes, Eric Bischoff said that his one idea, this is well before he got the job, was he wanted to make the brands completely distinct, because he says he can't see the value in separating them in the first place if you weren't going to do something on the production front or otherwise to make them separate, to give the audience an impetus to watch both as opposed to 5 hours of the same. And this is where the cynicism creeps in yet again, because the last time they did the roster split proper in 2016, SmackDown was starting to be filmed from very different angles. Mauro Ranallo was a very distinct commentator to that of Michael Cole, and look what it's like now to what it was then. It's just been wrapped up under the umbrella of WWE Productions. So my fear is that even if Vince at this point, and he must be because he's made the change in the first instance, is, his idea is, right, I need to do something different with SmackDown, especially ahead of the Fox move. The guy is simply fundamentally incapable of lasting change. So my fear is all of it. My hope is that I just don't know why he's got this job. Honestly, I'd be ecstatic to be proven wrong. Absolutely ecstatic. But if you look at the last 2 weeks of Raw, and indeed the last few months, over which Paul Heyman is meant to have had a degree of influence, I can't see any noticeable degree in change of quality at all. It hasn't suddenly got really good or even marginally improved. So if I'm looking at Raw as the comparison to what is meant to be different, I'm not seeing a damn thing.
My biggest hope is that Eric Bischoff had a bit of a reputation in the 1990s as a little bit of a stirrer backstage. He loved working the boys, like the Brian Pillman story of him letting him out of his contract, thinking this will really nobody will see this coming. Befriended Hulk Hogan.
He didn't see it coming.
He didn't see it coming. No. Befriended Hulk Hogan. There was always rumours that the reason he pushed Diamond Dallas Page is because they were mates, things like that. It used to be considered a bit poisonous when you brought guys like that back into the locker room. I think a bit of toxicity would be good for this group of wrestlers. I think a little bit of somebody stirring the pot and like befriending certain wrestlers or saying like, oh, you haven't got a lot of people talking about you. I'm not really seeing it, pal. Like just going like that little bit of negging, like just egging people on backstage. I want to, we've talked about this before in relation to the Attitude Era, for all its ills. Like I want to see stars that really seem like they want to fight for the place and be more than what they're just given every week. And he is old school in that regard. My fear is that he'll very quickly see that his impact is going to be negligible and just say no thanks, because he strikes me as a guy that can. I don't think he's a mark for pro wrestling. Like, I don't think he's a mark
for money. He's been like quite troubled.
He's a mark for money. I don't think he's a mark for Vince McMahon. I think he spoke honestly and earnestly enough in the past about Vince. He's defended his own legacy against how WWE have promoted like the fall of WCW. So I think if it's not working, like my fear is that like 6 weeks we'll be like, oh, remember the Bischoff thing? And it'll just be, I'd like it to be more drama.
Exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I'd like it to be more a sense of drama and a sense of intrigue and a sense of excitement before something like that occurs. I do think it's all very boring. I do think he'll be a valuable player when they join up with Fox. He's been a snake oil salesman for wrestling in the past, and they're going to need one of them when those numbers take a dive. So I think he'll be a valuable asset to the company, just not in a way that we're going to appreciate.
Biggest question of all, are we getting the SmackDown fist back?
Who cares?
That's the priority for me.
It's going to be the fist, but there's going to be a smattering of Bischoff on there.
Okay. Well, let us know your thoughts on what you expect for SmackDown Live tonight. And
the fist isn't going to make it better. People think this, you know.
The pyro might.
I don't know. It worked when they were reuniting the Shield.
People think, I know, get the fist back. That's it's like the omniscient fist is really going to change. People actually think this, you know. It drives us absolutely insane. I'll bring the fist back. The fist.
Let us know your thoughts. We've had a stomping grounds pay-per-view. Come on. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from for daily wrestling podcasts. And let us know your predictions as well for the Bischoff era of SmackDown Live. And you can tweet them to us at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there. You can follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
You can follow Michael Sidgwick at
Easy Eric B. You can direct abuse at M. Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilbourn. As I said, you can follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. This has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.